Hi, I'm Gerald Leow. I'm the featured artist for Art Encounters at Marina Bay Sands. So at Art Encounters, we're showing this work called Perpetual Motion, and I think very early on when we developed the work, it was during COVID, and I think one impetus for the work was about thinking about how the state of the world has changed, and we think of development and the world kind of in an unceasing development that somehow we never imagine it to stop. So I guess Perpetual Motion is in response to that. And of course the site of Marina Bay Sands for sculpture should reflect everything around it. So the form of the sculptures is also in response to all these buildings that we see. But I wanted to involve people. I think that we need people to activate sculptures, and by themselves they do not hold any meaning. So that's why we developed a series of kinetic sculptures that will move and encourage people to interact with them. The show has three parts to it. So there's one part with the outdoor sculptures, and there's two other parts where they are in the containers themselves. So for this, I think when thinking about public sculpture or large-scale sculpture, there's a lot of planning involved, and it's a very long, thought-out process. So it's a very rational and you can say sometimes a very rigid structure. So with the spaces in the containers, I wanted to explore a more free form of making and thinking. So I think the drawings started off as process drawings that were somewhat informational and technical, but as being an artist, as you develop the drawings, they tend to, you go into a zone where it reveals more of the subconscious meaning and layering to the work. So I think I really let that flow, and with that we created this series of drawings that are shown in the gallery. So another space is the studio space, and from the studio space we decided to create these little sculptures that enable visitors to kind of like see the process of the artist. So they are more like a sketch in 3D of my process, and it's a still ongoing sketch. So people can come in and see the works of that nature, and some of them even try to make the little wire sculptures, which is, it's interesting because the way that they were designed to be made, they are kind of haphazardly made, so you cannot plan and you cannot think. So I wanted to kind of reveal a state in between being rational and the subconscious layer, to kind of explore what it means to be making in this style. Usually when thinking about sculpture, I think the approach is not linear. I mean, what I find important in my process is that it's often a combination of material, some idea and drawings actually. The next thing about materials is I think the feeling of touch is very important, so I think you really need to feel it. And often with the creative process, you really have to let the material speak. You really have to listen, because I think the nature of creation is such that you have to respect the properties of these materials, and the nature of sculpture is also responding to material, so and its relation to people. So I think a large part of it is actually human contact with the material. So for Art Encounters, I think it was my first time actually working with an audience so closely. I think the nature of Art Encounters being a travelling space, it's a new interesting approach for me. So I think being in a live studio and talking to people, that's really new. For me, large-scale sculpture, or like just public sculpture in general, my interest in it is really about the human scale. So I really feel that it's important for sculpture to respond to the human scale. I think being in the containers itself is also another way of responding to the human scale. So I think like an opportunity for me, like Art Encounters, is great on a few levels. So one is firstly, like, you take the work out from a museum setting, and sometimes being in a museum setting can be quite restricting for a lot of people to experience the work. Few of the visitors that came expressed how delighted they were that they can actually touch it. That's one. And for me also, I think Singapore being just a small industry, this is just another opportunity to show, and there are not actually a lot of opportunities for kind of mid-career or non-young artists to show. So I think this is just a good platform to bring your work to a new audience.